podcast recording now.
Okay.
I'll do the intro. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Dear esteemed scholars and participants, welcome to today's Day Zero workshop, the Sustainable Development of China's NPO Community Elderly Care. I'm Dennis Relojo-Howell, the moderator of the workshop. The workshop will be presented by Zhuofeng Li. Mr. Li is a graduate from the University of Edinburgh, also with an MBA degree from China. His current research was conducted with the close collaboration with some renowned Chinese NPOs under the backdrop of the aging phenomenon, which has brought forward unprecedented challenges for the Chinese government. In this landscape, this workshop explores how NPOs and essential stakeholders navigate each other to address sustainability challenges in this sector. The research is believed to foster more sustainable competitive advantages for the NPO community elderly care sector and extend useful experience across the nonprofits industry. At the end of the workshop, there will be a Q&A session if time allows. So please welcome Zhuofeng for his presentation.
Thanks very much, Dennis. And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone, depending on what your time zone is. It's very honored to be able to present in the SDG conference. So let me share my screen first. Please kindly wait a moment. All right. Yeah, perfect. My workshop topic is the sustainable development of China's NPO community elderly care from stakeholder synergy perspectives. And so this is my presentation flow. Nowadays, China's aging problem is becoming prominent like never before. The UNESCO stipulates that a country enters an aging society when 10% or above of its population is over 60 years old, or when 7% or above is over 65 years old. So according to this criteria, and from the National Bureau of Statistics of China, the proportion of China's population aged more than 65 has been over 7% since 2001, showing that China has entered an aging society. Since then, we can also see from the table that the elderly dependency ratio has climbed to nearly 22% in 2022 in China. So in this dramatic aging phenomenon, it results in a pressing healthcare demand of the elderly care group and raises austere requirements for the Chinese government. In this backdrop, the State Council issued a guidance to establish the home-based, community-oriented, and institution-supported elderly care service system. Therefore, NPOs may participate in community elderly care as a strong supplement to reduce the government pressure and as the underpinning for industrial sustainability. Herein, the community elderly care refers to establishing venues within the community that provide comprehensive elderly care services, such as daily entertainment venues, older adult canteens, home of older adult caring, and daily life care services for the elderly in order to alleviate the shortage of care from their family members and caregivers during the day. We can see some daily community activities of the elderly care group in China through some pictures. Picture 1 refers to the elderly canteen within the community. And picture 2 and 3 are the older adults getting together to make some Chinese foods such as dumpling and zongzi that are popular in the traditional Chinese festivals. Picture 4 refers to some volunteers are doing some voluntary therapy for the older adults. It seems the volunteers are doing some moxibustion for the elderly. Moxibustion is a kind of traditional Chinese acupuncture point therapy, which is done in the summer season. And it is good to prevent influenza or improve the body's immune system. Picture 5 is the NPO staff doing some open lectures regarding health or hygiene. Picture 6 and 7 refers to the older adults learning some paper cut exercises and doing some painting competitions in order to practice their hands and brains. Here, sustainability in our paper is regarded as an integrated approach requiring an organization to realize its potential in terms of finance, society, and environment simultaneously while managing the tensions and synergies between them. However, there are prevailing challenges influencing the sustainability of the sector. Previous research point out 3 significant challenges that NPO encountered: legitimacy crisis, bureaucratic governance system, and changing policy. The first, some exceptional cases of mistreatment to older adults within rare unscrupulous NPOs has caused the legitimacy crisis for NPOs among the public. The legitimacy crisis hampers NPOs in establishing themselves within communities and building trust from the elderly. Second, the government agency's bureaucratic governance system has jeopardized NPOs' specialty and their long-term commitment. And the third prevailing challenge is the changing policy from the government further exacerbate NPOs' operational difficulties. Most NPOs can hardly receive sustained funding except certain elderly care projects, such as the governmental direct purchase or some commissioned services. Some other researchers further review that the fluctuating changes in public policies originated from shifts in political leadership has severely influenced NPO's fundraising effects. These prevailing challenges have tremendously hindered the sector's sustainability. So as a result, it is imperative for researchers to exploit the corresponding causes and the coping strategies with the support of essential stakeholders engaged in the sector.
Okay. So Zhuofeng, can you help to introduce the theoretical basis for us?
Yeah, absolutely. Here we go to some literature review regarding the history of stakeholder theory. Stakeholder theory is a theory of business ethics and organizational management. Since our research is conducted from stakeholder synergy perspectives, as such, I will merely have a quick go through about the primitive stakeholder theory. According to stakeholder theory, organizations aim to generate multiple benefits for various stakeholders, typically defined as all individuals and groups who can influence the achievement of an organization's goals or can be influenced by its process of achieving the goals. This definition was raised by Freeman in 1984. So, stakeholder theory can be defined as a theory which encourages organizations to acknowledge and consider their internal and external stakeholders, promote understanding and managing stakeholder needs and demands, represents a holistic and responsible framework for decision-making, which in turn enables organizations to be strategic, maximize their value creation, and safeguard their long-term success. On the other hand, the stakeholder synergy theory hereafter refers to SST, which is proposed by Tantallow and Prim in 2016. Developed upon the traditional stakeholder theory by recognizing that some actions may simultaneously increase shareholder wealth and improve the outcomes for other stakeholder groups without trade-offs between parties. This is possible because stakeholders usually have multiple utility needs. The SST pursues reciprocal situations and emphasizes identifying key stakeholders who are essential to the organization's development and seeking synergistic collaborations between them. There are three fundamental methods for achieving stakeholder synergy. The first and simplest method is to increase the utility received by one essential stakeholder group without negatively affecting the value received by any other stakeholder groups. This method is labeled as single stakeholder value creation. The second method is when managers find complementarities in needs. This is labeled as complementary utilities across two or more essential stakeholder groups. This is possible, as explained just before, because each essential stakeholder group may have multiple utility needs. For example, a single strategy innovation can increase value for one stakeholder group, while also increasing a different type of value for another group. Again, without affecting any other essential stakeholder group's benefits. And the third method for achieving stakeholder synergy is labeled as follow-on efficiency. This means several reinforcing effects of stakeholder synergy can occur as follow-ons to the single stakeholder or complementary utilities innovations. For example, when one or more essential stakeholders receive increased value from a single strategic innovation, they are likely to be more motivated and exhibit stronger commitment and trust in the firm. Furthermore, they will likely result in better communication and operation efforts among other essential stakeholders. These concurrent increases in motivation are also likely to have follow-on positive effects on the behaviors of other stakeholder groups as well. So altogether, these synergies represent opportunities for managers to simultaneously increase the overall utility for all the stakeholders without trade-offs. So these are the three fundamental methods to increase the size of the stakeholder utility pie and the overall value created by the business system within the company.
So, Zhuofeng, how do you classify the stakeholders in the sector of NPO community elderly care?
Yeah, this is what I want to entail as follows, because we should realize the roles and functionalities of the stakeholders within the sector before probing into their relationships and mechanisms. Yeah. We can see that there are a lot of stakeholder classification approaches raised by different scholars based on our literature review. Among the numerous approaches, Wheeler and Stillemper's stakeholder classification approach is of the most relevance to the non-profit nature of the sector. According to stakeholder closeness to the organization, they classify stakeholders into 4 categories based on social attributes. The primary social stakeholders, which are directly associated with organization activities. The secondary social stakeholders, which are indirectly associated with the organization through social activities. The primary non-social stakeholders, which directly influence the organization without associating with its key staff. And the last is the secondary non-social stakeholders, which indirectly influence the organization without associating with any parties. We assert that Wheeler and Stillamper's stakeholder classification approach sheds light on understanding the roles of stakeholders in the NPO sector. There are 2 rationales. The first is they classify stakeholders according to the closeness of interest to the organization from social attribute perspectives. And the second reason is that other classification approaches mainly discuss stakeholder relevance from a business trade-off perspective on business relevance or business priority of stakeholders. But they ignore the social attributes such as social behaviors and personalities. However, these social attributes will certainly influence the sector's survival and sustainability. In this regard, Wheeler and Stillamper's approach is deemed most fit for understanding the stakeholder roles in the sector. We will further explore the roles and functionalities of stakeholders within the sector based on the aforementioned 4 categories of social attributes.
Okay, based on previous research, can you tell us what are the differences or novelties between your current research and prior research, and what niche questions you aim to study to contribute to the sector?
Actually, there are some research gaps between our research and prior research. For instance, extant literature lacks a rigorous conceptual framework to understand the mechanism among essential stakeholders of the sector, resulting in strategic ambiguities to overcome the challenges systematically. Moreover, extant literature discusses some developmental strategies for the overall nonprofit industry, but rarely discusses synergistic collaboration among stakeholders, exclusively fit for the status quo of NPO community elderly care. So it is conducive to exploring the synergistic collaborations to sustain the sector's development. These are our research questions. What is the stakeholder synergy model for NPO community elderly care? What are the sources of challenge? What are the fundamental causes of the challenges? And what are the coping strategies for China's NPO community elderly care from stakeholder synergy perspectives?
Okay, so how did you conduct the research?
We use inductive semi-structured interview to conduct the research. The participants are 22 NPO directors and senior managers engaging in community elderly care. Their scope of responsibilities covered community development, public relations, elderly services, volunteer management, and firm operations. We can see this table for the participants' demographic information. Also, formative analysis was employed as the data analysis method for identifying themes in relation to our research questions. And we use the 6-phase organic approach of formative analysis to code and generate theme development.
Are there any interesting findings in relation to your research questions?
Yeah, we identify the comprehensive challenges that China's NPO community elderly care faces. Out of a streamlined pattern, I will not elaborate all the sub-themes verbatim. However, relevant examples or elaborations will be presented for significant or interesting results. That further exacerbate the operational difficulties. This result supplements pre-research which review the management challenge of NPO's accountability dilemma. The poor mobility in human resources intensify the dilemma between NPO's upward accountability to the government agency and the downward accountability to the elderly care group. So some managers review they need to pay extra time and energy to deal with the traditional code of conduct with the government agency. We assert that NPO's intrinsic management importance brings in this situation of accountability dilemma. The second challenge is the government's bureaucratic supporting system. For example, the neighborhood communities' indifferent attitudes and ineffective process jeopardize NPO's specialty and long-term commitment. Some managers point out the intermittent changes in the obscure funding policies have hindered NPO's sustainability. For example, the government used to allocate funds for NPOs beforehand, but now it only provides subsidies according to the account of services. This research result corroborated previous research that most NPOs can hardly receive substantial funding except particular elderly care programs, such as governmental direct purchase and commissioned services. Other managers claim that the shifted government officials inevitably disrupt the funding allocation process. What's worse, the governance system is disrupted, which means the governing regulations on implementation process and performance evaluation on NPOs are mutually isolated, depending on whosoever handles the job. These discrepancies by the political transitions severely affected NPO's fundraising effects. Some other managers mention the neighborhood committee's weak promoting and guiding role to NPOs, indicating a lack of propaganda for the NPOs on the bulletin boards around the community. Therefore, only a few older adults could be aware of the NPO services within their living community. The third challenge is volunteer instability. This mainly refers to the unstable service hours and service quality from the volunteers. The fourth challenge is the elderly skepticism towards NPO services. Some managers record the elderly may think that NPOs are government supported, so they should not charge at all. This public ideology have brought in two problems: the elderly's over-demands and expectations on NPO services, and their resistance against the NPO's paid items. Moreover, our research result, some elderly's solitary personalities and rigid ways of thinking corroborated Villa and Silamper's argument that social attributes such as personality will influence the stakeholder dynamics. The fifth challenge is bias from some public and media. Some social media expose and condemn the very exceptional misconduct of NPOs, such as mistreatment of the elderly, and they question the initial motive of NPOs' paid services. This consequently leads to public bias and the legitimacy crisis of NPOs among the public, which impedes NPOs in establishing themselves within communities and building trust from the elderly. For the causes of NPOs management impotency, a lot of managers reveal that most NPOs have unclear market positioning within the overall industry, and they possess imbalanced power status compared to the government agency. First of all, the unclear market positioning of NPOs make it hard for them to distinguish what services they should specialize and what services should be counted out. This positioning ambiguity has led to management impotency and perplexity in the services focalizing and distinguishing, resulting in their stagnant development. Second, the inherent imbalanced power status between NPOs and the government agency cause NPOs difficulties in stakeholder collaborations. The implementation of NPO activities largely depends on the cooperation and support of the neighborhood committee, which is more advantageous in mobilizing community resources and manifesting the activity's legitimacy from its inherent administrative power. However, the government agency herein refers to the neighborhood committee, more regarding NPOs as the external competitor of resources and the challenger of the activity control right than the collaborator. Therefore, the committee often holds an indifferent attitude towards NPO staff, which exacerbates NPO's poor mobility in human, finance, and utility resources, and debilitates the synergistic effects between them. For the causes of the government's bureaucratic supporting system, it is ascribed to the misaligned priorities between the government agencies and NPOs. For example, it is revealed that the government agencies often chase after short-term political accomplishments, such as the number of activities, service amount, and completion rates. However, these metrics may not be the priorities that NPOs pursue. Instead, NPOs envision enhancing capacities for the elderly's living pattern, improving their mobility, self-care services development, and improving their living quality in terms of reduced loneliness, increased social interactions, enriched resilience and well-being, etc. It can be seen that the performance priorities between the government and NPOs are misaligned. The misalignment is probably brought by the perennial bureaucratic policies and entrenched governmental practices, overemphasizing the quantifiable performance of NPOs. Some managers further claim that the government's shifty officials have miscellaneous understandings of our implementation criteria and evaluation metrics, making NPO directors confused and exhausted. And often, during the pre-execution phase, the government officials take a cursory trip, but during the performance evaluation, they are scorekeeping for each indicator. These discrepancies in evaluation behaviors resulted in its bureaucratic system. Further to the causes of volunteer instability, according to our coding analysis, it is ascribed to the absence of volunteer incentives and training. Specifically speaking, volunteers concerned about the feasibility of the time-bound plan. That is, the time-bound plan, that is how to compensate their accumulated services into the benefits they can uphold substantially in the future. Herewith, the time-bound plan refers to a system designed to address the growing need for the elderly by promoting volunteerism. Volunteers contribute their time by helping older adults with tasks like cleaning houses, running errands, or providing companionship, and so on. Each volunteered hour typically translates to one-time coin or credit. These credits can be saved and used later in life by the volunteer themselves, or when gifted to or even they can gift it to their family members. Once they reach a certain age, usually 60, they can redeem these credits for similar care services. But many managers raise practical questions on behalf of the volunteer group. Will the organization recognize my service then? Is there any guarantee in terms of policy, materials, or finance? And will I be prioritized the provision of such services after I get old? And will the organization still survive 5 or 10 years later? Simply put, this is the absence of volunteer incentives and training that cause the volunteers instability. For the causes of the elderly's skepticism towards NPO services, based on our coding analysis, it is ascribed to the elderly's sciolism to NPOs. Generally, the elderly are unfamiliar with the scope of NPO responsibilities, and some of the older adults are marginalized and isolated from the mainstream society, causing this challenge. For the causes of the bias from some public, it is ascribed to some traffic chasing media which overplay the rare misconduct of the NPO cases. Consequently, this led the public to jeopardize the reputation of the sector and even harm the enthusiasm of other peer organizations to engage in the sector. So, it will be very meaningful to propose corresponding coping strategies to address these pressing issues to boost the sector's sustainability. And actually, we quote some interesting findings of the coping strategies that NPO directors and managers raised. This table refers to our coding and theme extraction. First of all, is the NPO bidirectional management. Bidirectional management herein refers to internal and external management approaches strategically to overcome the management impotency. For internal management, NPOs can relocate their market position through the do's and don'ts. The first approach is to balance their vision of ambidexterity, which means to find a balance of its non-profit nature and a certain level of profit margins to enhance their sustainability. This balance should be reflected for its development, public value creation, and appropriation, because this might facilitate the integration of NPO's stability of public service deliverance, organizational transformation, and facilitate the government's downward administrative culture. The second approach is to differentiate the government, the elderly care management, and the disability care management. Some Irish practices can be mirrored that the elderly disability care should be in charge by specialized nursing and medical institutions rather than NPOs. Just as some managers raised, we should distinctly recognize our complementary role to the government in the overall healthcare system and focus on the elderly care group to optimize our services. With this approach, we may focalize our vision on serving the community elderly only and refine our service programs to enhance sustainability. This might also help mitigate NPO's accountability dilemma. In addition, NPOs can explore modest marketization through paid services such as physiotherapy or marketing events such as collaborating senior universities, and keep improving the volunteer expertise through organizational and occupational training. For the external management, there are two approaches for NPOs to overcome the management impotency. First, they can ensure the transparency of information disclosure and funding use on their official websites or accounts. And the second approach is they can establish regional NPO associations to negotiate with the government on critical management issues. Regional NPO association is recommended to establish as the intermediary platform to negotiate with the government agency. We assert that aligning with peer organizations to establish regional NPO association can facilitate in NPO's professional image, as such, alleviating the powerless status who negotiating with the government agencies. In addition, compared to the third-party hub, NPO associations would be more cost-effective in mobilizing resources. Please see the figure on the right corner for the intermediary function of NPO association. Regarding the coping strategies for improving the government's bureaucratic supporting system, it lies in mitigating the misaligned priorities between the government agencies and the NPOs. So, how to do that? Here is a possible strategy. Since some tasks and performance indicators of the two stakeholder groups are intertwined, the government agencies might seek to establish cooperation with NPOs based on their work convergences and vice versa. For example, some managers proposed they may try to participate in the government's Life Village projects for modest marketization. Moreover, the government may authorize them to engage in the physical recovery program. Since the government provides them with free rehabilitation venues, they could charge minimal fees lower than the market price to survive. Some managers also suggested the practices of the Singaporean government may shed light on forging stable and sustained policies for Chinese NPOs. In Singapore, its Home Nursing Foundation scheme extensively provides economic nursing services for the elderly at home at affordable rates. The elderly who suffer strokes, fractures, arthritis, and even Parkinson's disease can benefit from this scheme. Moreover, health checkups and consultations are also free for the elderly. So NPOs in China could draw reference from the Singaporean practices to improve its supporting system. Besides, the government should authorize NPOs' legal identity through explicit legislation and strengthen its promoting role within the community so as to mitigate NPO's legitimacy crisis. Regarding the strategies to cope with volunteer instability, there are two approaches to mitigate the challenge. The first approach is to improve the volunteer incentive system, for example, the time band plan. The second approach is to train up volunteers with psychological knowledge to prevent them against the emotional contagion from the elderly care group, particularly from those with rigid ways of thinking and solitary personalities due to their long-term isolation from the mainstream society or their families. Regarding the coping strategies to alleviate the elderly's skepticism towards NPO services, they should specialize both of their standardized grid-based services and their bespoke services. Herewith, the purpose of grid-based services is to meet the general expectations of most older adults, while the bespoke service, such as physiotherapy, is to sustain NPO's development through trying modest marketization. This two-way strategy further refines the proposition of differentiated management, which explicitly delimits the service scope of NPOs. Herein, the grid-based service scheme refers to NPOs classifies the service regions into different grids, with volunteers responsible for serving seniors within their designated areas. This helps streamline the service delivery and reduces the travel time. The grid could also represent different service categories, such as food pantry and social services offered by the NPO. Regarding the strategies to mitigate the bias from some public and the media, managers suggested that NPOs should involve the public and media to participate when they are launching the elderly care events in order to enhance its transparency in its operations. Also, NPOs could consider collaborating with peer organizations to increase the social impact. Simply put, NPO community elderly care acts as a socio-economic system composed of essential stakeholders with the fundamental goal of adding value to each other. Here is the mapping of the sources of challenges faced by the sector, the causes behind, and the procedural coping strategies to address the pressing issues and boost the sector's sustainability. These coping strategies offer valuable insights for practitioners and policymakers in mitigating the challenges and employing collaborative efforts to realize stakeholder synergy. So I could further illustrate the mechanism between NPO and its essential stakeholders. We developed a stakeholder synergy model based on the analysis of their roles and functionalities. So it's better to expound their synergy mechanisms. First of all, this study poses the government as the primary social stakeholder because it takes the leading role in guiding, regulating, and promoting social activities, NPO's social activities, suggesting a stronger intervention than other stakeholder groups of the sector. Moreover, we found that the government exerts more as the governor than the sponsor with functionalities in terms of policy stipulation, NPOs performance evaluation, funding allocation, and community facility confirmation throughout the whole process of NPOs operations. In this regard, the government undoubtedly plays a pivotal intervening role in maximizing NPO effectiveness. However, the enhancement of its supporting utility, specifically speaking, in its consistency in regulating NPOs, is vital to ensure the synergy effect between the government and NPOs. This corroborates the first fundamental method labeled as the single stakeholder value creation for achieving stakeholder synergy by Tantalot and Priam. In addition, as a tax collector, we assert that the government intrinsically possesses the indemnity utility to the elderly care group within the system to shelter their old age. As the positive follow-on outcomes, the indemnity utility increment is also likely to draw other older adults to either join or buy services from NPOs. Further to the volunteer group, we posit it as the secondary social stakeholder because they indirectly associate with NPO operations through voluntary social activities. They are the supporters of NPO services, influencing the life quality of the elderly, and partially mediate NPO services effectiveness and the elderly trust. Our study also revealed that volunteers' sense of identity will highly influence their commitment. This synergy effect is aligned with the second fundamental method labeled as complementarity utilities because NPOs find complementarities in needs between themselves and volunteers. That's because NPOs aspire for volunteer stability while volunteers ask for definitive reward guarantee. So the value creating innovation of the volunteer incentive system will be strategically effective. Further to the elderly care group, this study posits the group as the primary non-social stakeholders because they are relatively marginalized but still can influence the NPO performance directly. They act as the facilitator of NPO services since they interact with and provide NPO staff and volunteers feedback to optimize the services. So they might facilitate in solving public healthcare general problems. In addition, we argue that some reinforcing effects of stakeholder synergy can occur simultaneously. For example, the elderly's trust in NPOs and volunteers' commitment will increase as the derived potencies to the single stakeholder value creation and the complementary utilities. Further to the public and media, we posit the stakeholder group as the secondary non-social stakeholder that indirectly influences NPOs without intense association with any parties. They do not engage in NPO social activities in general, but can influence people's attitudes through the media's private preferences of disclosure and interactions. Our study also identified this stakeholder group as the moderator that would magnify the NPO image to the society through disclosing NPO behaviors, constructing societal symbolic values, and appropriating the public values. It moderates the relationship between NPO behaviors and the elderly trust. Altogether, this synergy exhibit opportunities for NPO directors and managers to increase the overall utility for all essential stakeholder groups simultaneously without trade-offs to increase the size of the stakeholder utility pie.
Well, fantastic. I think it's time for us to wrap up everything, the social phenomenon of aging and the imperative for elderly care present severe challenges for the Chinese government, particularly within the context of NPO community elderly care. Zhuofeng explored how NPOs and essential stakeholders navigate each other to address the sustainability issues in the sector. It embarks a pioneering effort to develop a structured and interactive stakeholder synergy model by analyzing their social roles and functionalities. Importantly, the study provides both theoretical and practical implications to practitioners, scholars, and policymakers for understanding the mechanism of essential stakeholders. But before we end the workshop, does anyone have any questions? Because the Microsoft Teams is limited to set 1 hour for the workshop. I think it's better to answer 1 or 2 questions. Please feel free to ask questions if there are any. Okay, so I think if there are no questions, I think we should end the workshop, or if anyone still have questions, you can also drop Zhuofeng an email. Thank you again for the SGD organizing committee. Bye.